one planet, and you will find this, I think, a very interesting experience, and then we'll continue with our debates and discussions and what you want to say. Please all, when you want to say something, raise your hand and take part. Thank you.
There are many kinds of rights. Most apply to a certain group. But human rights are the only ones that apply to absolutely everyone, everywhere.
The question of torture, the question of summary executions, of religious intolerance, of freedom of opinion and expression, which are so essential to the system when you will see, I think, the Universal Declaration and the 30 articles that it has. In fact, the articles of these 30 articles are a springboard for the further international treaties on human rights that the member states have signed and ratified.
Hotel goes to a country that's sort of accused.
Say it again.
So you talked about
The typical example is the question of human rights violations in Chile. The first time that was considered to condemn Chile, that had the government of Pinochet as a dictator, the resolution was passed by the General Assembly and appointed a working group to go and look into human rights violations in situ. They went, they prepared a report back, and Chile has been followed at least for 6 or 7 years until they finally changed the regime. So it's being tracked in everything that does, and usually internally in the country. The non-governmental organization
is onefuture.oneplanet.org. We collaborate with Earth Focus here in Switzerland. That's how we're based in Switzerland, but we are in 16, 17 countries. And the purpose of this dialogue is to hear each one of you about a different subject that we call justice. We would like you to think of what would be your idea of justice, and we will walk through the different steps. Stanley will guide us throughout.
What do you think the perfect society can be? Wow.
Because that's 12 people who decide on the fate of one person.
Yeah, but still,
Pretty fair.
like some people, if it's someone that, what if someone then again, what is her?
Everyone should have access to food and water.
We try again, see if we can beat the 10 seconds. No touching. 1, 2, 3, go. What else did we learn from there? It was awkward.
We get really excited. We get really excited.
We got really excited. Yeah, some people don't want to stop, huh?
just don't say no, Robin.
No. Okay, that was a nice exercise to do, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, we have in the podium representatives from different countries that are going to talk to us about the concrete actions that we need to take to get to a just society. Let's welcome them with a big clap of hands. We will start with representatives from Singapore.
So our first action is that we create.
Can you turn the microphone on?
Our first action is that we're creating awareness of human rights by including it into the school systems.
Simplifying the language by using pictures to send the message across, because sometimes reading words is harder and pictures can mean more. Like a picture can portray 1,000 words. And
our first action was to provide equal education for everyone, because with equal education, everybody will have equal opportunities in the future. The next was better communication, because arguments are often solved if people just communicate to each other and tell them what each other did wrong and try to fix it. Then acceptance of others' opinions, because not necessarily you're not always right. So, yeah. Then merit society, which means basically that you get for what you work for a fair reward. And then a punishment fits the crime, unless it's murder, which in that case, lifetime in prison. So yeah.
The next presentation comes from the world.
So if you were unaware that we have to choose a country, so we picked the world. And our first action to be taken to create a just society was no visa, freedom of movement. So this means that someone could go anywhere and when they want. Because in one of our group's members, her friend had a passport and he was Palestinian, and it was written he could go anywhere except for Israel, and we don't want that. To make a just society, we want to accept everyone.
Our second action is strict regulation of the criminal justice system, because recently we've seen a presentation about human trafficking, and apparently in some countries they have 7 years of being put away in jail for dealing drugs, and for human trafficking they get 7 years for human trafficking and 20 years for dealing drugs, whereas a human's life is much more important than just drugs.
And the third one is less surveillance in private places. Mr. King Horn, he was in the UK and he took the train, and when he went to the toilet, apparently there was a camera. So we don't think it's... We don't think it's necessary, and we think that people need their own privacy.
The fourth action that we chose was create environmental awareness, because in some countries such as Singapore, they get fined or put away in jail for just throwing gum on the floor, whereas in other countries they don't get punished or fined or anything for throwing big pieces of trash on the highway or any other place.
And our final one is a fair distribution of the world's resources. So we find it important that everybody has a fair piece of the world.
The next country is the host country, Switzerland.
So we, as our first action, we chose to promote internet access. We chose this because internet can be used to spread information and inform a lot of people about things that are going on. We know that not everyone can have internet, so maybe we thought that we could put computers or internet in internet cafes to make it accessible to everyone.
Another question was create a World Parliament Assembly. We heard something about this idea going through, and what we thought, since if there would be a representative that would say the problems in each country, then it would be a lot easier to solve them than having to spend more time finding a way to raise awareness, when instead you just say it to the others really easily in the assembly.
Give a minimum salary to everyone, because in some countries, like, they really don't earn anything. They can earn like $1 a day, which is pathetic. And why there should be like a minimum price, like, well, because labor can be too cheap, it's a bit unfair. That some people should work just about as hard, or not even as hard, and get paid more than some people that are working harder and getting paid less.
We also chose to create or improve a joint communication system. This is a bit like the internet access, but it would be a place where people could express their opinions and have the freedom to say things to improve their communities. This would help a lot of issues that are happening.
We should control the finance of the rich, the super rich, because the rich you are, the less tax you have to pay in some countries. I don't know about Switzerland. Because if you're super rich, it's like they want you to be richer than you. The poor, the middle class people have to pay the most, and the rich have to pay the less. Yeah.
The next country is Iran, Democratic Republic of Iran.
We chose Iran, and we thought that one of the major actions that we should do is to distribute equally water, petrol, and land, because these are the major reasons why war occurs, and we want to, we don't want war to happen.
Two is provide health care for people that need it, for example, disabled people and children, because children, they need vaccinations and medication if they get sick and for illnesses, and also disabled people, they need special transportation and they can't go, they might not be able to go upstairs or take proper transportation, so we thought that was also one of the major actions that we could take. Also, discrimination of gender should be abolished, because in Iran they usually think that the women are not as important, can't do as much as the men can. So that we thought if it was abolished, they could be both, neither of them can be discriminated and they would be treated equally.
We want the people in Iran to feel secure, and that's why we would also like to have a better implementation of the government protection. And we would like to provide an education for everybody and ensure democracy in Iran. Thank you.
A world court of human rights is the most natural thing in the world, but there's no universal court of human rights as such, where individuals could have access. Only states have access to the International Court of Justice. You, as an individual, cannot send a complaint to The Hague and say, my human rights have been violated. Only your government, in the exercise of diplomatic protection, can assume your rights and then represent your rights as a citizen of country X against country Y. So that's the only way the ICJ can deal with individual violations. But the state must represent you. What you would like to have is what we have with the Human Rights Committee, that an individual can present the case directly to the court. Obviously, it will not be a court of first instance. The World Court of Human Rights will be an appeals court. It's only after you have exhausted domestic remedies. And basically, there's nothing wrong with demanding that. The idea of exhausting the legal processes in your country. Ultimately, what you want, if there is a conflict, if there's a dispute, you would like to have the dispute solved on the ground, locally. You don't want to have a court far away in Geneva or in The Hague deciding your fate. It's a lot better if you get your remedy directly at home. It's only when you don't get it that you should be able to appeal higher to a World Court of Human Rights. Well, the process in itself is a form of education, because we can only get there and get these conventions adopted and respected once there is an international consensus. People are sensitized. People know what the problems are. We have to deal, unfortunately, with a great percentage of people who don't care and don't bother to find out more. They just live in a kind of inertia and let themselves be carried without actively becoming involved. And my hope for your generation is the social media, that through the social media you will actually be much more active.
Given that weapons of mass destruction entail a grave threat to the right to life of all humanity, the use of weapons of mass destruction is prohibited, right? What about the possession? Is that implying that countries should be allowed to possess these weapons of mass destruction?
Well, the Human Rights Committee back in 1984 gave an answer to that. In adopting General Comment number 11 on the scope of Article 6 of the Covenant, it said that the production, stockpiling, and use of nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction constituted a violation of Article 6. So certainly the element of stockpiling belongs there.
The process is way too complicated, and that's the way it has to be. But there is absolutely no way we're going to get kids interested in this process if it's going to be like this. Complicated.
Could I have a word? I think I think that we have to make a distinction regarding the presentation on two separate issues. Why is it mentioned 2048 as a symbolic date?
Oh, I know that's symbolic.
But that does not mean that we will wait until 2048 to really make this implementation. The first step to have this Bill of Rights sort of ready in our program is in the next 3 years, not 48, but in the next 3 years. Because in concurrent to what people bring in for the input in the website, IBOR has, at the Palais des Nations, concurrent with the meetings of the Human Rights Council, meetings of specialists that clears up the text and brings it up to date. So the proposal is that in the next 3 years, we are going to have a text that will be presented to member states that will go to the General Assembly. Rather than, so don't think that it's 2048 that we are going to wait.
And these nations signed on behalf of their colonies. This, on the other hand, contradicts the values displayed in the Declaration. African states such as Kenya and Tanzania had no voice in the construction of the document. Therefore, the purpose of the Declaration, which is to provide each and every person, regardless of race, gender, and nationality, a right to voice their opinions, was contradicted even while it was forming. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not a legally binding document. However, it has been used as a foundation for many international treaties, policies, and organizations that are legally binding, and if violated, have severe consequences. The ICC, International Criminal Court, judges the extent and the consequences for individuals or groups that have extremely violated the human rights and freedoms. These treaties and organizations have made a positive impact and have helped the world take one step closer to that which is portrayed in the Declaration.
And currently, the ICC has opened 7 investigations into Africa, which include Ivory Coast, which is the case of the former president of Ivory Coast until 2010 and his wife. So what happened here was that the prosecutors requested authorization to open a full investigation in June 2011, and the wife of the former president was arrested in April 2011 and is currently under the custody of the Ivorian authorities. However, her husband is under the custody of the ICC, and his confirmations and charges of hearing are yet to be announced. Then we have Libya, which is quite famous. It is also the case of Gaddafi, his son, and the intelligence chief, who are responsible for multiple crimes against humanity and persecution. The arrest warrants were issued in June 27, 2011, and the jurisdiction were on February 2011. However, the investigations were opened in March 3rd. Gaddafi's proceedings were finished earlier in October because he had died. However, his son and the intelligence chief were arrested in November and March and still remain under the custody of the Libyan authorities. Then there's the other case of Sudan, which is in mainly Darfur, which this focuses into the criminal acts which were committed during the war in Darfur from 2003 until 2010. The conflict simply began when the Sudan Liberation Army and the Justice Equality Movement began attacking the Sudanese government in response to Black Sudanese oppression by the majority Arab government. And this action has been described as genocide by a number of governments and human rights groups. And out of the 7 people who were convicted, 4 of them are currently fugitives, and 1 of them was dismissed. But for the remaining individuals, the charges are yet to be confirmed. After Sudan, there is Central African Republic, which is the case of Jean-Pierre Bemba, who was one of the 4 presidents in the transitional government of DRC, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo. This happened from July 17, 2003 to December 2006. He was arrested, however, in May 2008, and the arrest, of course, was warranted by the ICC. And the trial began in November 2010 and it is still ongoing. Then we have the DRC, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo. This deals with the crimes committed by the DRC during the Second Congo War and its aftermath, which include the Ituri and Kivu conflicts. The war started early in 1998, and although a peace agreement was made between the combatants in 2003, the conflict still continued in the eastern part of the country for several years. The prosecutor had initially charged 6 people with committing crimes against humanity, and of the 6 people, only 2 are fugitives. 1 has been dismissed, and the 3 remaining are still currently waiting for judgments to be dismissed and are currently under the ICC custody. And the remaining one has been sentenced to 14 years of imprisonment. Then, after the DRC, we have Uganda, which I'm sure most of you know about. This deals with the investigation of the Lord Resistance Army, which deals with Joseph Kony. This has been taking place in northern Uganda and its neighboring regions since 1987. And this is a Christian-based group which is led by Joseph Kony, who is accused of numerous human rights violations, including massacres, abduction of civilians, the use of child soldiers, sexual enslavement, and so on. And out of the 5 people who were convicted, only 1 proceeding was concluded as the individual died. However, the remaining 1 are still fugitives, including Joseph Kony. And we also have the case of Kenya, which will be explained after this. And what we found out was that even though over the past decade, the ICC has been accused of being a bit biased because the ICC investigation has stirred concerns over African sovereignty, in part due to the long history of foreign intervention. And some commentators have also claimed that the prosecutors have limited investigations to Africa because of geopolitical pressure, in which is either out of a desire to avoid a confrontation with major power as a tool of Western foreign policy.
So for Kenya, we really wanted to give you a perspective, and so from our perspective, we want to just give you some context of the situation. And so we've constructed a short timeline. So in December 2007, on the 27th, you had the general elections taking place. And on the 30th, you have Mwai Kibaki, who's declared the winner amidst allegations of electoral fraud, which caused outbreaks of violence, the post-election violence. Then in February of 2008, on the 5th, the ICC prosecutor announced the ongoing preliminary examinations of the post-election violence, which happened in Kenya. Then on 28th, a mediation team, which is led by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, oversaw the signing of a power-sharing agreement called the National Accord and Reconciliation Act, which established a coalition government with Kibaki as president and Odinga as prime minister. It also set up the Commission of Inquiry on Post-Election Violence, which was CIPEV, which became known as the Waki Commission, which was named after its judge. Then in October of 2008, the Waki Commission submits its report and recommendations to the government of Kenya, and these recommendations included the establishment of a special tribunal to investigate and prosecute perpetrators of post-election violence. Then in February of 2009, the Kenyan Parliament votes against the recommendations, which encouraged the ICC involvement. In March 2010, we have the pre-trial chambers to give the go-ahead for further investigations in Kenya for the post-election violence in relation to the crimes against humanity. Now, for the whole of 2011, the majority of 2011 was the defendants appearing and the charges being confirmed at The Hague for alleged crimes against humanity. 6 members being tried were Ruto, Koski, Sang, Muthaura, Kenyatta, and Ali for their alleged responsibility in the commission of crimes against humanity. And then in January 2012, the charges were confirmed against Ruto, Sang, Muthaura, and Kenyatta, with charges against Ali and Koski rejected. And on the 26th, which is the last event, you have Kenyatta and Muthaura, who resigned as finance minister and the head of civil service, respectively.
So now we've basically got some context about the events that took place in Kenya after the elections of 2007. So what was the response like in Kenya after the post-election violence and the ICC intervention? The ICC case in Kenya has met with mixed responses. A week after Chief Prosecutor Moreno Ocampo declared that he would be seeking to prosecute senior and prominent public figures, including members of the cabinet and a radio personality, the Kenyan National Assembly voted in favor of removing Kenya as a state party to the Rome Statute, which of course established the ICC. Among many arguments proclaiming Kenya's sovereignty as a nation, the Minister for Energy claimed that the ICC was a colonialist imperialist court. However, according to a survey carried out by Sinovate, shortly after Moreno Ocampo's announcement of the suspects, 60% of Kenyans at the time supported the trial of the accused taking place at The Hague. One notices a dichotomy here between the decisions of the politicians in the National Assembly and the independently assessed public favor. The reasonable assertion here can be made that some politicians have portrayed the ICC as a foreign court to the Kenyan public, rather than an extension of the Kenyan judicial system itself. Under the International Crimes Act of 2008, which is part of the Kenyan Constitution, the ICC is considered an arm of the Kenyan court. Therefore, its portrayal as an alien, incompatible body with the Kenyan Constitution has no ground. In fact, the Waki Commission report that was sent to The Hague for preliminary consideration is testament of this fact. So why are politicians getting any amount of backing for harboring suspected criminals? The answer lies in the deeply knotted system of tribal affiliations and alliances within Kenya. Many politicians have garnered support for their attempts to defer the ICC case by playing this tribal card, by portraying the accused as one of us, as prominent members of the tribes. Kenyans have been attempted to be persuaded to sympathize with the accused. In fact, following Moreno Ocampo's identification of the suspects, President Obama released a statement to Kenyans, and I quote, "Those found responsible will be held accountable for their crimes and as individuals. Let the accused carry their own burdens," unquote. While many respected this call, there were those who saw the message as seemingly hypocritical. that the US would encourage Kenya to comply with the ICC while themselves being non-signatories to the Rome Statute. Deep-rooted tribal affiliations aside, there is a strong sense of discontent within the Kenyan judicial system among Kenyans. For many, it has been far too long that those wielding influence enjoy impunity. Indeed, in a small survey we conducted in a semi-urban slum around Mombasa, all of the 50 people we approached held the view that the suspects were rightfully being tried at The Hague, rather than in the Kenyan judiciary. The ICC is a tool that can be used internationally to combat impunity, with Kenya being a pertinent example. It is the Kenyan civil society that has been a key part of the trial so far, with providing evidence, witnesses, and pushing for the administration of justice. In the years to come, development of this very civil society will help Kenya move past this stage in our history.
Having just heard about the importance of civil society, how does Kenya's post-election violence and the ICC's involvement help Kenya's future development and work towards the 2048 project? With the aim to help educate students and the public about the evolution of international human rights through occasion conferences and events, the post-election violence and the trial to come in April 2013 will be an example of an event that will work towards 2048. The 100th anniversary since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was drafted. The Kenyan leaders presently awaiting to be tried in 2013 are accused of violating human rights. From these, William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta also running in the presidential campaign in March 2013. They're using this to cushion themselves against the repercussion. These governmental powers are worsening conditions of others' lives, and in some other African ICC cases that we heard, they successfully got away as fugitives without any sentence. From this, we know that we need to make the new bill in 2048 improved and enforced, creating difficulties to infringe their rights. The Kenyan case helps in seeing that even if countries do not appeal for intervention, the ICC will take action, making future leaders fearful for attempting violation, discouraging impunity. In Kenya, through experience and our survey we conducted in Bombolulu, the small area in Mombasa, we were able to see that these human rights are not given to the less educated society, and therefore people are completely unaware of the maltreatment they have been undergoing. Kenya is the only country in which justice has been enforced upon by the ICC due to the severity of the situation, and this shows the lack of knowledge in the government to foresee the problem arising, which caused the death of many Kenyan citizens. The Kenyan Council of Human Rights cannot solely take on the extremely rigorous task in controlling every person in the country, and that they are living with the basic rights from the Declaration. And it is in dire need for the participation of the society to help Kenyans gain the knowledge to help themselves. Presently, the mentioning of the Declaration and human rights is absent in government schools, as it is felt that these children do not hear the rights that they should be having but are not. However, waiting until university level is far too late, as in primary schools would help teach children to have respect for human beings, themselves, and others. Therefore, implementing the human rights in-depth into the local curricula in various countries to widen the awareness and teach the youth the basic needs which are essential for strengthening the Declaration, also making the new bill in 2048 easier to construct and take place without the constant violation which is presently happening worldwide.
Thank you very much. We would now very much appreciate questions from the room. Anyone at all?
I have one that regards, in fact, jurisdiction. When you spoke about the case